Welcome to the Non-Skinnerian Podcast, where we will challenge you not just to think logically, but to think psychologically. Here we dive into the fascinating world of behavioral economics and gamification, uncovering how deep psychological insights can transform the way you design, build, and lead. Hey there, non-Skinnerians! Welcome back to another episode of the podcast where we venture beyond the logical and dive deep into the psychological, motivation, human behavior, and gamification without the gimmicks. I'm your host, Roman Rackwitz. Today's episode is going to take us into a fascinating concept called almost, from Teresa Amabile and Stephen Kramer's research in their book, The Progress Principle. Now, before we get started, I've got to share something with you. We recently received a comment from Mo, a learning architect, that said, and I quote, "I thoroughly enjoyed reading this and loved listening to the intro during my morning workout. So please make sure that it's at least 45 minutes for the next episode. Can't wait for more already." First of all, I love that you're tuning in during your morning workout, Mo, but are we talking like a quick jog around the park or something else? But anyway, I appreciate the enthusiasm. So here's what I'm thinking. To all of you lifting weights, jogging, or maybe just trying to get out of bed while listening, today's episode might not be 45 minutes, but hey, I'll do my best to keep you motivated for a solid workout. After all, if you have already started, you're almost done, right? Oh, what a segue. Anyway, let's dive into today's topic, the magical power of being almost there, as described by Teresa Amabile and Stephen Kramer in their research on motivation. Whether you are almost at the finish line of a big project, almost completing the last rep in your workout, or almost at the point where you realize the fridge is empty and it's time for grocery shopping, the episode is for you. But before we dive into what means that for motivation and gamification, let's set the scene with something we can all relate to. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been really deep into a project, maybe working on a puzzle or completing a challenge, and you hit that moment where you know you're almost done? Like the finish line is right in front of you. You're so close you can practically taste it. But for some reason, it feels like the most critical part of the journey. You might feel excited, maybe even a little nervous or anxious, but overall you're driven. You're laser focused because you're right there. Almost. That feeling is more powerful than we often realize. It can either push us forward with incredible energy or frustrate us when we hit obstacles. But what if I told you that this almost moment isn't just a random feeling? Today we are going to explore why this moment is so potent and how it plays a huge role in both our motivation and in systems like gamification. As it turns out, the almost moment might be one of the most important phases of achieving any goal. So let's get into what Amabile and Kramer discovered. In their book, The Progress Principle, they studied the emotional experiences of people at work. They analyzed thousands of daily diary entries and found something fascinating. People are happiest and most engaged not when they finish a task, but when they feel they are making meaningful progress toward their goal. Now, think about that for a moment. It's the progress that keeps people going. It's those moments when they are almost there that often give them the motivation to keep pushing. When people feel like they are making progress, even small progress, their motivation, mood, and overall satisfaction increase. It's that sense of being almost at the finish line that drives us, not necessarily the final reward itself. I want to emphasize this because it's a subtle but critical shift in how we think about motivation. Traditional models, like the Skinnerian approach, tell us that people do things because of the rewards they receive at the end. But Amabile and Kramer are showing us something different. It's the journey, the progress toward the goal that sustains our engagement and energy. In fact, we often feel the highest level of motivation when we are in that almost phase, because we can see the end but still need to exert effort to get there. Now, think about how this applies to your own life. Have you ever started a long-term project? Maybe learning a new skill, writing a book, or training for a marathon. The start is exciting because it's new, but after a while, that initial motivation might fade. It's only when you start making noticeable progress that your energy comes back full force. This feeling of almost ties directly to how our brain functions. Let's take a quick detour into the world of neuroscience, specifically the work of Andrew Huberman and Robert Sapolsky. These researchers have fundamentally changed how we think about dopamine, which is often called the pleasure or reward chemical. Here's the twist. Dopamine isn't really about the pleasure of receiving a reward. It's about anticipation. Dopamine is actually released when you're in pursuit of a goal, not when you have achieved it. Think about that for a second. Your brain is more excited and engaged while you're in the process of striving towards something when you're almost there. Huberman talks a lot about this, explaining how dopamine works like fuel during the process of pursuing goals. It's what keeps you motivated when you're making progress. The almost moments where you feel like you're so close to finishing trigger this rush of dopamine, driving you forward. The brain is designed to seek out and reward progress, not just the end result. Let's connect this back to non-Skinnerian gamification. If you are a regular follower of my content in the last 15 years, you know I talk a lot about creating systems that motivate people based on intrinsic factors. Things like autonomy, mastery, and purpose, rather than dangling external rewards like points or badges. This is where the concept of almost really shines. In a non-Skinnerian gamified system, the focus isn't on external rewards at all. It's about creating an experience that keeps people engaged through progress and mastery. And the almost phase plays a huge role in this. When a user feels like they are close to completing a challenge, whether that's leveling up in a game, completing a task in a productivity app, or mastering a skill, they are motivated to keep going. Why? Because they can see the finish line, and that anticipation drives them. Now, remember what we said earlier about dopamine. It's the anticipation of completing that task, the sense of being almost done, that keeps users hooked. It's not because they want a badge or a score. It's because they are chasing the satisfaction of progress and mastery. And this is where non-Skinnerian gamification truly stands out. When you design for progress rather than external rewards, you're tapping into the natural, built-in human desire to grow and improve. You're leveraging dopamine in a way that sustains motivation for the long term, not just for short bursts of extrinsic rewards. Let's take a moment to really reflect on this. Whether you're designing a game, a learning platform, or even trying to build new habits for yourself, the almost concept can be a game changer. How can you keep yourself or others engaged in that sweet spot where you're constantly seeing progress, but not quite finished? Let's look at a few examples where this almost concept plays out in real life and gamified systems. In the gaming world, designers use the almost concept masterfully. Think about a time when you were playing a game and you got stuck on a difficult level or boss battle. The game keeps you in that almost state for a while, giving you just enough progress to keep trying, but not handing you the victory on a silver platter. That's where the game really gets addictive. You're so close to beating the boss, and that feeling of almost creates the anticipation that keeps you coming back. Or habit formation. If you've ever used a habit tracker, you'll notice that the most satisfying part of the process isn't necessarily finishing the habit streak, but being close to completing it. That almost feeling, the desire to not break the streak, keeps you motivated to push through, especially when the goal is something personally meaningful, like improving your health or productivity. So, how do we actually create more of these almost moments in your system or daily lives? Here are 3 strategies to design for almost and keep people motivated. For example, gradual progress and feedback loops. In any system, whether it's a game or productivity tool, make sure that users are given regular feedback that shows their progress. This doesn't have to be a big achievement. Even the smallest step forward can trigger that feeling of almost there. Create systems that offer feedback at key moments so that users feel encouraged to keep going. But be careful, we are talking about progress from a qualitative point of view, not a quantitative one. This is important. The next one is purposeful challenges. You want to ensure that users experience challenges that are just within their grasp. If something is too difficult, they lose their motivation. But if it's too easy, they will get bored. The sweet spot is in the almost, when the goal feels just attainable but still requires effort. Another one is reflection and mastery. Finally, tie the progress to something meaningful. If people can reflect on how much they have grown or learned, they'll stay motivated. It's not just about finishing a task, it's about getting better at something they care about. When they realize they are almost mastering a new skill, that progress fuels further engagement. But be careful. We are talking about progress from a qualitative point of view. I've already said that. It's not about a quantitative. This is important. When we talk about progress, we are not just referring to numbers or metrics. This isn't about simply showing someone how many points they have accumulated or how many tasks they have checked off a list. The real magic happens when feedback is tied to qualitative progress, the kind of progress that reflects improvement, mastery, and personal growth. When most people think of progress, their minds immediately go to numbers. I've completed 5 out of 10 tasks. I've earned 1,000 points. Or I'm at level 7 now. But purely quantitative feedback can lose its emotional impact over time. It becomes just another number, and numbers alone don't connect us to the deeper satisfaction of getting better at something meaningful. Qualitative progress, on the other hand, focuses on the experience of improvement. It tells users how they are getting better and why what they are doing matters. It's about understanding the journey, not just hitting arbitrary milestones. So there's the trap to avoid: over-quantification. When systems rely too much on numbers, leaderboards, or badges, the intrinsic value of the experience can get overshadowed. Instead of feeling like they are genuinely improving, users may start focusing solely on chasing numbers, which can lead to burnout or disengagement. Numbers are useful for giving a snapshot of progress, but they don't tell the full story. What truly keeps people engaged is knowing how they are getting better in meaningful ways. The almost concept, described by Teresa, Amabile, and Kramer, offers a powerful way to understand motivation. Whether you are designing a gamified system, working toward a personal goal, or trying to keep a team motivated, the key is to focus on progress and the journey. Dopamine, as we have learned from the work of Huberman and Sapolsky, doesn't spike when we receive rewards. It spikes when we are in pursuit, when we are almost there. So, the next time you're feeling stuck or designing a process for others, ask yourself, how can I create more almost moments? Because that's where real engagement lives. That wraps up today's episode of the Non-Skinnerian Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to dive deeper into the psychology of motivation, progress, and gamification, make sure to subscribe and share this podcast with others who might benefit. And as always, thanks for listening. Keep chasing that progress and stay in that almost zone. Hey, psst, Mo, pull through. You're almost there.